Howdy Excel students, and welcome to my instructional video on how to write an if statement and if statements in general. So the screen that you're looking at is from our Chapter 3 Part 1 assignment, and it was where I asked you 5 questions about if statements, something that you were to do with pencil and paper rather than do on the computer, just to kind of get you better acquainted with how to write an if statement. So what I'd like to do in this video is go through these questions with you and see if I can enlighten you a little bit more about the process that you go through when you write an if statement. All right, so question number 1, the directions are to circle the scenario that requires an if function, and you've got 3 scenarios to look at. So we're going to look at scenario number 1. It says to calculate a 5% increase in expenses for next year's budget. If you were to do that, you would just take last year's expenses and multiply it by 5%. So there's really no choices to make there. There's not a logical test. Scenario 2 says indicate if the total sales for the month are higher or lower than last month. There's a couple of things here that tip you off. The first one is the word if usually indicates that there's going to be some kind of a logical test. The other thing that is in this one that kind of tips you off is higher or lower, and those two things tell you that yes, in fact, this needs a logical test. Just to make sure we're on the right track, let's look at scenario 3. It says to find the average monthly revenue. An average is just a function that you have used. So that does not require a logical test. So the answer to question number 1 is scenario 2. All right, moving on to question 2. This is probably the question that most students had trouble with. So if you were struggling with it, don't feel too bad. So let's look at the scenario. Far Out Designs is a company that hosts websites and designs websites for companies. Employees share in a $250,000 bonus if the quarterly revenue exceeds $14 million. Calculate the quarterly bonus using an if function. Write your answers in the space below. So first thing I maybe confused some of you with was I'm not wanting you to write the formula here, just to think it through and write the words. So when I want you to write the logical test here, I want you to, in a sentence, jot down what the logical test is. So in this case, we need to find out if the quarterly revenue exceeds 14 million. So our logical test is does quarterly revenue, I'm going to abbreviate that, exceed 14 million. Okay, in my own words, or in your own words, what will happen if the test is true? If the test is true, then we are going to have 250,000 put into the cell. Okay, so if the logical test is true, 250,000 will be entered. We'll just leave it at that and kind of shorten that up. And what will happen if it's false? Let's see, back to the scenario. It doesn't really say what to do if it's false, but if it's not 250,000, it's going to be 0. So 0, or the actual 0, not the word 0, will be entered. Okay, now the last step here is to actually write the if statement out as it would be written on the computer. Okay, so handwrite the if function for cell B9 using the correct syntax. Syntax means the correct computer terms, okay? So if we were typing this into the computer, we would start with an equal sign, the word if, and then a parenthesis. We would write the logical test. So imagine that we are sitting here in B9 while we're writing this if statement. So we need to compare B7 with 14 million. So if B7 is greater than 14 million, then the first comma is where it represents the then, if you're thinking about an if-then statement. 250,000 will be placed into this cell, so we just write 250,000. Otherwise is the second comma, and then we write what to do if it's false. We want the computer to put a 0, and then we would close. So we have written this handwriting it with the correct computer syntax. All right, moving on to question number 3. Question number 3 says, write an if function using the correct syntax that performs the following logic. If a person works more than 40 hours during a week, indicate that by writing the word overtime in the cell to the right of the hours worked in column D. It didn't really say what we should do if they didn't work over 40 hours, so we can assume that we do nothing if that's the case. All right, so we're going to be writing this. We're going to be sitting in cell D4 when we create this if statement, and when we're finished, we'll copy it down, right? So we're going to start with the equal sign and the if, open parentheses, and we want to look at cell C4. Is C4 greater than 40? If it is, then we want to have it write us the word overtime. Whenever you want Excel to write a word, you have to put it in quotation marks. Otherwise, we want it to write nothing. And the way you tell the computer to write nothing is put 2 quotation marks but nothing in them and close the parenthesis. So that's question number 3. Question number 4. Write an if function using the correct syntax in column C that calculates the correct deduction for the employees based on their salary. So this one you have to look a little bit deeper, because you have to look and see that if an employee makes under 30,000, their deduction rate is 6%, and if they make over 30,000, their deduction rate is 8%. All right, so we'll write an if statement that does all of the calculation based on the 30,000 being equal to or greater than 30,000. Okay, so as we write this formula, we are going to write it in cell C6, and then we'll copy it down. Okay, so we start with an equal sign and if, and we are looking at the salary in B6, so is B6 less than 30,000? Notice how I'm not using commas when I write numbers in these if statements. I don't, because the commas in the if statements are one purpose only, and that's to separate the 3 areas of an if statement. Okay, so it is B6 less than 30,000, and if it is, we want to calculate their deduction by multiplying their salary, which is B6, by 6%. Now we actually could put in cell B3 there if we wanted to do that, but we're gonna write it out the old-fashioned way. So if it's less than $30,000, we want to multiply our salary by 6%. Otherwise, we want to multiply our salary by 8%. So the by 8% is what if it's false. Okay, so that's question 4. And moving on to question 5. Okay, in question 5, if a stylist sells $1,000 or more of products or vitamins, they will receive a 5% commission on the sales. Write an if function using the correct syntax that calculates a 5% commission for those stylists that sell at least $1,000. If the stylist does not meet the commission, write no commission. Okay, so we're writing this formula in cell F4, and then we'll copy it down. Okay, so we start with our equal sign and our if and our open parenthesis, and we are going to be looking logically at the total sales that they've made. So E4 is E4, it says calculate if they sell at least $1,000. So greater than or equal to, because it looks like if you sell right on $1,000, it would work as well. So is E4 greater than or equal to 1,000? If it is, we want a 5% commission on their sales. So that would be E4 times 0.05. Otherwise, we're supposed to write the words no commission. So with words again, we put quotation marks. We write the words we want it to say. Close quotation mark and close parenthesis. Okay, so that is the answers to questions 1 through 5 on Chapter 3, Part 1. And I hope this little video helped you. And good luck with the rest of your chapters.